Welcome to your deep dive. We'll be exploring the world of work, health psychology, and well-being.
Exciting stuff.
It is. It's all about how our work lives impact our mental and physical health.
And vice versa, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And today we're unpacking insights from the Handbook of Work and Health Psychology.
A great resource. Prepare for some serious aha moments.
I had a few myself, starting with the cost of stress in the workplace.
Oh, yeah, that's eye-opening.
$150 billion annually in the U.S. alone.
Staggering, isn't it? And the UK is dealing with over 4 billion pounds.
Oh, no. Absenteeism and reduced productivity are factors, but it's more than just sick days, right?
Absolutely. Presenteeism is a huge part of it, being there physically but mentally checked out.
Ah, I see. Leading to errors, missed deadlines, you name it.
Exactly. Those days when you just can't focus, they all add up.
So this book, how does it help us understand this problem?
It goes deeper than just numbers. It looks at the psychology behind stress.
Okay, so how we interact with our work environment then?
That's a big part of it. And the book introduces this idea of integrity.
Integrity? I thought this was about health and well-being.
It is, but not integrity in the traditional sense, more about alignment with our work.
I'm intrigued.
And a key part of that is ground.
Ground, like the floor.
Well, not literally. Think of it as the background of your workday, those routine tasks, the familiar faces.
Oh, okay, I'm starting to get it.
Our brains often tune it out, but
But it's still important.
it is. Our subconscious is always scanning for changes in that ground.
Interesting. So even small disruptions can trigger stress.
Subtly, yes. So think about your day. How much is on autopilot? And does that familiarity help you feel present?
That's a good question for our listener to consider. Now, what about stress itself?
The book defines it as a moment where we have to do something, but we can't or won't.
So feeling trapped or overwhelmed, I've definitely been there.
It's a common experience, and biologically, our brains see it as a threat.
Like a fight or flight response.
Exactly. Our bodies are ready for a saber-toothed tiger when it's just a deadline.
Our ancient wiring misfiring in the modern workplace.
That's a great way to put it.
And that's how the negative spiral starts. Less effectiveness, less motivation, isolation.
It impacts our well-being and health. Listener, when was the last time you felt that kind of stress at work?
We've all been there.
But the book also says work doesn't have to be stressful. It can actually be enjoyable.
That's right. Especially when it challenges us just the right amount.
Not too easy, not too hard. The Goldilocks principle.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot that keeps you engaged.
Like a good puzzle. But doesn't our individual tolerance for stress play a role too?
Absolutely. We all have different thresholds,
Yeah.
and the book talks about what happens when the challenge is off.
So too low, I imagine boredom sets in pretty quickly.
You got it. Boredom, irritation, trouble concentrating. Our brains are forced to pay attention, and that's exhausting.
And too high, we're talking anxiety and burnout.
Exactly. So it's all about finding that balance for optimal performance and well-being. Speaking of balance, this ties into orderliness at work.
Ah, yes. It's more than just a clean desk. It's the level of structure in your environment.
I know that feeling. Can't find anything on your desk? Stress levels skyrocket.
The book explains how a chaotic environment becomes a collection of stressors.
So you're constantly reacting to problems, seeing your colleagues stressed, overwhelmed city.
You nailed it. But then too much order can lead to boredom, right?
Yeah.
No room for creativity.
It's that Goldilocks principle again. Just the right amount of order. So listener, think about your workspace. Where does it fall on that spectrum?
Good question.
And let's not forget values. Feeling like our work has meaning.
Absolutely. The book calls this compatibility, how our values align with our organizations.
And when they don't?
It can lead to problems, less performance, difficulty achieving goals, even feeling like you don't belong.
Like a square peg in a round hole.
The book mentions that this can be tough for people from different cultures. Sometimes there's a clash.
Makes sense. So listener, do your values mesh with your organizations? If not, how's that impacting you?
Good food for thought.
Now, on to a tougher topic. How stress can lead to unhealthy behaviors.
Right, those maladaptive responses.
Like smoking more, drinking, maybe even turning to drugs.
The book addresses that, but it's important to remember stress is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's never just one thing, is it?
Exactly. Addressing these behaviors requires a more holistic approach.
The book dives into how workplace culture can enable these responses, like after-work drinks becoming the norm, or tight deadlines leading to sleep deprivation and reliance on caffeine.
Absolutely, it can become a vicious cycle.
To break free, we need to look beyond individual choices and see the bigger picture.
Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about individual differences in how we handle stress, vulnerability, and resilience.
I'm all ears.
It comes down to our beliefs about the world, how we think we can deal with it. Optimists versus pessimists.
I like to think I'm an optimist, but realism is important too.
A healthy balance. Research shows optimists are more flexible in their coping strategies,
So they adapt to the situation, whatever it throws at them.
while pessimists might stick to strategies that aren't working. Listener, think about your typical reactions at work. Do you lean towards optimism or pessimism?
And how does that influence your ability to cope? Speaking of which, the book defines coping as any attempt to manage stress, whether it works or not.
And it's not just about personality, it's also situational.
What works in one situation might not in another, like different tools for different jobs.
A great analogy. The book talks about active coping strategies being the most effective, but sometimes, especially when things feel out of control.
We need a different approach.
Right. The book calls them palliative strategies, more about managing the emotional impact.
So having a diverse toolbox of coping mechanisms is key. Listener, what are yours? When do you reach for which tool?
Important questions to ask ourselves.
Now, onto a specific emotion linked to health problems. Anger.
Right. And the book highlights a striking connection. Expressing anger and hostility is strongly associated with CHD.
Coronary heart disease. Wow, that's serious. But what do they mean by expression?
It's about distinguishing the content of hostility, cynicism, distrust from the style, a loud voice, interrupting, being demeaning.
So it's not just feeling angry, it's how we let it out.
Exactly. And both contribute to negative outcomes, but the expressive style seems to be a stronger predictor for heart problems.
Makes you think twice about just letting it all out.
Indeed.
Okay, now for something a bit more positive. Job control. I'm always looking for ways to feel more empowered at work.
Well, the book challenges the traditional view of job control as just a buffer against stress.
I mean,
It's linked to positive outcomes like better physical and mental health, regardless of how demanding the work is.
so it's not just about minimizing the bad stuff, it's fundamentally good for us.
That's what the research suggests, having a sense of agency, ownership over our work.
But isn't some stress needed for motivation? How do we find that balance?
Excellent question. It's not about eliminating stress entirely, but about having the resources to manage it.
And job control is one of those resources.
Absolutely. Flexibility in your schedule, authority to make decisions, feeling like you have a say.
Makes sense. But there's so much talk about empowerment these days. Is it just lip service?
That's where it gets tricky. The book suggests some new management practices aren't as empowering as they seem.
So empowerment in name only.
In some cases, yes. Job control stays low, but the pace of work goes up. And technology can be a double-edged sword.
Right. It can give us more control, but also be used to monitor us more closely.
It all comes down to implementation and how work is structured. Careful job design is crucial.
So it's not the technology itself, but how it's used. Now, this next section is about the psychological contract, but with a twist.
It's about the state of the contract, not just whether it's been broken.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's about whether the promises made by the organization have been kept. Fairness and trust come into play.
So do I feel treated fairly? Do I trust them to follow through?
That's the heart of it. And the book suggests a positive state of the contract isn't just about the absence of bad things, it leads to good things.
Not just avoiding harm, but actively supporting well-being.
Exactly.
We talked about technology and control. I imagine it also impacts flexibility, a hot topic these days.
Absolutely. The book connects flexibility to health risks, saying long-term exposure to jobs with low decision latitude can be bad news.
So even if you love your job, if you lack control, it can still be harmful.
That's what the research suggests. And decision latitude has two parts: using your skills and controlling your situation.
Both important for feeling empowered.
The book also mentions a sudden decrease in decision latitude can increase health risks within a couple of years.
That's a pretty short time frame. We need to be aware of these changes and advocate for our need for flexibility.
I agree. Now, this next part challenges the idea that being busy is always good.
Wait, you're saying there's a downside to constant activity. But productivity is king, right?
Well, the book acknowledges the benefits of active work, but cautions against too much demand.
So even engaging work can become detrimental if it's too much.
That's the question the book raises, and it uses extreme working hours as an example.
I've been there, done that.
The problem is it can lead to a loss of social support both at home and at work.
So you're so busy you neglect relationships and end up isolated.
Exactly, and that can have a big impact on well-being.
So how do we break free from this always-on mentality?
The book suggests a shift in focus. Instead of just studying what's wrong, stress, and burnout, we should focus on well-being and health.
So a preventative approach, building healthy work environments from the ground up.
That's the idea.
Research plays a big role in work and health psychology, but this book says it can go beyond just documenting problems.
It can be a tool for positive change
In what way?
by identifying common meanings and creating a basis for improvements, using research to build a new reality where work promotes well-being.
So not just studying what's broken, but using that knowledge to create something better. But how do we actually put that knowledge into action?
Well, for managers, the book proposes a risk management approach to work stress.
Sounds practical. Tell me more.
It's about identifying the major stressors for a given group of employees.
Proactive, anticipating problems before they arise.
Exactly. And it's not about measuring everything perfectly. It's about understanding enough to take action.
A good enough approach.
Yeah.
And where does technology fit into this?
It's a double-edged sword, remember. It creates opportunities for control and for increased monitoring.
Right, so the context and how work is structured around the technology are crucial.
Absolutely. The book highlights the importance of a holistic approach to implementing technology, involving employees and providing training.
So employees feel heard and have the resources to adapt. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, gender. The book really challenges the idea of a gender-neutral workplace.
It does.
We talked about the stressors women face, the glass ceiling, being underrated and underrewarded, but how do we actually solve these problems?
Yeah.
It feels like we've been talking about them forever.
It's a long road, but the book offers some solutions. It starts with awareness organizations recognizing that gender bias exists and has consequences.
And then actually doing something about it.
Right. That could mean diversity training, clear policies against discrimination, mentoring opportunities for women.
So real systemic change, not just talk.
Exactly. And challenging the assumptions and stereotypes that fuel this bias. The book talks about how traditional leadership often favors masculine traits.
We need to broaden our definition of leadership then.
Precisely. Recognize and value the strengths women bring to the table, promote more women to leadership roles, encourage them in STEM fields, create a supportive environment for everyone.
A culture where everyone can thrive. Speaking of which, let's talk about the second half of our careers.
The book challenges the stereotype of older workers being problematic. It emphasizes the huge variation in how people function as they age.
Some people are going strong well into their 70s. Others are ready to retire at 55.
Individual differences are key, and the book highlights the difficulties older workers face keeping up with changes, especially around technology and culture.
Staying relevant in a fast-paced world is a challenge for everyone.
But the book also emphasizes the value of their experience and knowledge. They bring so much to the table.
Finding ways to bridge the generational gap and create a more inclusive environment for everyone.
Absolutely. Mentoring opportunities for older workers, training to keep them up to date, recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute.
Now, on to organizational learning and change. The book says organizations can learn and adapt just like individuals can.
That's right. And that ability is crucial for surviving in today's world.
It's not just about individual growth, it's about the organization itself evolving.
Exactly. And the book introduces this idea of organizational culture, how it shapes behavior and responses to change.
Like the organization's personality.
A great way to put it. And like with people, some cultures are healthier than others.
So what makes a healthy organizational culture?
Open communication, trust, collaboration, a willingness to embrace change. Creating a space where people feel safe to take risks and learn from mistakes.
Sounds ideal. But how do you build that kind of culture?
It starts with leadership. Leaders need to model the behavior they want to see
Walk the talk.
and create systems and structures that support the culture. Clear communication channels, feedback mechanisms, rewarding the right behaviors.
Creating a culture where everyone feels valued.
That's the goal.
And this leads us to management development. The book argues for a more holistic approach, focusing not just on skills, but on creating healthy workplaces.
Right. It's not just about efficiency, but about developing leaders who prioritize well-being and create positive environments.
Not just getting the job done, but doing it in a way that's good for everyone.
And the book highlights career development as a key part of this.
Supporting managers in finding their strengths and achieving their goals.
Investing in your people so everyone benefits.
Now, we've talked a lot about work, but it's just one part of life.
True.
Finding that work-life balance.
And that's where the manager's whole life's model comes in. The book presents 5 arenas: work, self, family, community, and spirit.
Not just for managers, right? This applies to everyone.
Absolutely. It's a model for a more fulfilling life.
So break it down for me. What do these arenas encompass?
Work is about our professional lives, jobs, careers. Self focuses on personal growth and well-being. Health, hobbies, learning.
Taking care of ourselves holistically.
Exactly. Family is about nurturing relationships with loved ones, spouses, children, parents, spending time, offering support, making memories.
Okay, what about community?
It's about our connection to something bigger.
Yeah.
Our local community, a volunteer group, a cause, contributing, making a difference.
Feeling a sense of belonging and purpose beyond ourselves.
And lastly, spirit is about connecting to something even bigger, whether it's religion, nature, or art. Finding meaning and inspiration.
Feeding our souls.
The book emphasizes that well-being comes from balancing these 5 arenas. Neglecting one or more creates stress and imbalance.
Like a wheel with a broken spoke.
A perfect analogy. So, listener, think about your balance across these 5 areas. Are there any that need attention?
What small changes could you make to create more balance and well-being in your life?
Great questions to consider.
Welcome back to our deep dive into work, health psychology, and well-being. We're continuing our exploration of the Handbook of Work and Health Psychology, and there's still so much to uncover.
It's a rich text, that's for sure.
Last time we talked about that sweet spot of challenge at work. Too much or too little can really impact our well-being.
Right, finding that balance is key.
And we touched on job control and feeling empowered. But how do we actually create that kind of work environment? What are some practical steps?
Well, the book highlights the importance of involving employees in decisions that directly affect them.
So giving them more autonomy.
Exactly. It could be about their schedules, choosing projects, or being part of team decisions.
Making them feel like their voices are heard.
And providing opportunities for skill development and advancement.
So they feel like they're growing and moving forward.
Right. When employees feel like they're learning and progressing, they're more likely to feel in control.
It's about investing in your people. Showing them you care about their growth.
And let's not forget feedback. Regular, constructive feedback.
It's so important. But it's got to be done the right way.
Absolutely. It should be supportive, encouraging, not critical or judgmental.
Creating a culture of continuous learning, not blame.
That ties into the next section, which challenges how we think about accountability.
Oh, this is interesting. I've definitely been in situations where blame was a go-to when things went wrong. It just creates tension.
It doesn't help anyone. The book argues that kind of blame-oriented accountability creates fear and anxiety.
Which ultimately hurts performance, not helps it. So what's the alternative?
The book talks about shared accountability.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's about shifting from blame to commitment.
So working together to find solutions instead of pointing fingers.
You got it. Open communication, mutual respect, and a willingness to share both responsibility and rewards.
That makes so much sense. Building a culture of trust and collaboration, not fear and competition.
And the book gives some practical strategies for how to actually implement shared accountability.
I'd love to hear some examples.
Well, it starts with securing personal commitment from everyone involved.
So not just assigning tasks, but getting people invested in the team's success.
Right. And clarifying expectations so everyone's on the same page about what success looks like and how to measure it.
Clear goals, clear metrics. That can prevent so many headaches down the line.
And lastly, providing ongoing support. That could be regular check-ins, access to resources, or simply creating a space where people feel comfortable asking for help.
Creating a culture where it's okay to make mistakes as long as we learn from them.
That leads to a much more positive and productive environment. Now let's circle back to gender for a moment.
We talked about some of the unique stressors women face in the workplace, but what can we actually do to address them? It feels like we've been having this conversation for years without much progress.
I hear you. It can be frustrating. But the book does offer some solutions. First, it starts with awareness. Organizations need to acknowledge that gender bias is real and it has real consequences.
More than just acknowledging it, though.
Absolutely. It has to be followed by action. That could mean diversity and inclusion programs, clear policies against discrimination and harassment, mentoring opportunities specifically for women.
So moving beyond just words and actually creating change.
Right. And challenging those underlying assumptions and stereotypes that contribute to the problem. The book talks about how traditional ideas of leadership often favor masculine traits.
So we need to redefine what good leadership looks like.
Exactly, and value the strengths that women bring to the table. Promote more women into leadership, encourage more women in STEM fields, just create a supportive environment overall.
An environment where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Speaking of thriving, let's talk about those in the second half of their careers.
The book pushes back on the idea of older workers being resistant to change or struggling with technology. It really comes down to individual differences.
Some people are embracing new challenges well into their 70s. Others are ready for a change of pace much earlier.
And the book acknowledges that adapting to rapid changes, especially with technology and organizational culture, can be difficult for some.
It can be hard to stay current when the world is moving so fast.
But it also emphasizes the incredible value of experience and knowledge that older workers bring.
So much wisdom. It's about finding ways to bridge that gap between generations.
Exactly. Create a more inclusive and supportive environment for everyone.
Maybe that means mentorship programs, where older workers can share their expertise with younger colleagues.
Or training programs to help older workers stay up to date with new technologies and ways of working.
Recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute, no matter their age.
That's the key. Now, let's shift gears to organizational learning and change. The book explains that organizations, just like individuals, are capable of learning and adapting.
They have to be, right, to keep up with the times.
Exactly. It's essential for survival in a world that's constantly changing. And the book introduces the idea of organizational culture as a major influence on how an organization behaves and responds to change.
It's like the organization's personality.
I like that. And just like with individuals, some personalities or cultures are healthier than others.
So what are the hallmarks of a healthy organizational culture? What should we be striving for?
The book highlights a few key things: open communication, trust, collaboration, and a willingness to embrace change.
Sounds like a pretty ideal workplace.
It is. And it's about creating an environment where people feel safe to take risks, share ideas, and know that it's okay to make mistakes.
Because mistakes are just opportunities to learn.
Exactly. And this all comes back to leadership. Leaders are crucial for shaping the culture and creating that environment that supports learning and growth.
They have to set the tone. Lead by example.
Absolutely. Leaders need to walk the talk, be open to feedback, admit their own mistakes, and show that they're committed to learning and growing themselves.
So it's not just about telling people to do it, it's about showing them how it's done.
Right. And it's also about empowering employees to take ownership of their own learning and development.
So giving them opportunities for training, mentoring, coaching.
Exactly. Creating a culture where people feel comfortable asking questions, sharing knowledge, and supporting each other's growth.
Creating a learning organization where everyone is always growing and evolving.
That's the ultimate goal.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's our final exploration of the Handbook of Work and Health Psychology.
We've covered a lot, haven't we?
We have, from the sneaky costs of stress to those different ways of coping. But today we're tackling some really hot topics.
Like new technology, the needs of older workers, and how organizations can learn and grow.
The world of work is changing so rapidly these days.
It really is.
And technology is a huge part of that. But as we talked about before, it's a double-edged sword.
Right. The book looks at how technology can both empower and monitor us.
So like telecommuting can give us more control over our time and work-life balance.
Exactly. Flexibility is a huge plus.
But there's also the potential for more surveillance, that pressure to always be on.
That's the downside. The book really stresses looking at the whole context. It's not just about the tech itself.
So how the organization uses it, how work is structured around it, that all matters.
It's about creating a culture of trust and flexibility, so employees feel empowered to use technology in a way that works for them.
Without burning out, right?
Exactly. And it requires clear guidelines around communication and availability. Setting boundaries is so important.
Now let's talk about the second half of our careers. We touched on it earlier. The book pushes back against that stereotype of older workers being resistant to change or tech-phobic.
It really comes down to individual needs and preferences, doesn't it?
Some people are thriving on new challenges well into their 70s. Others are ready for something different much sooner.
Exactly. The book acknowledges that keeping up with constant change, especially with technology and culture, isn't easy for everyone.
So how can organizations better support their older workers, those who might need a little extra help navigating all these changes?
Well, the book emphasizes creating a culture of lifelong learning, providing training programs to help older workers stay current.
And not just technical skills, but adapting to the new ways of working, the evolving culture.
Right. It's about making sure everyone feels respected and included, regardless of age.
And valued for their experience and knowledge.
Exactly. Creating that win-win where everyone benefits from the exchange of knowledge.
Mentorship programs would be great.
Absolutely. Older workers sharing their wisdom with younger colleagues and everyone learning from each other. Now let's move on to organizational learning and change,
The book talks about organizations being able to learn and adapt just like people do.
which is essential for survival in a world that's changing so fast.
It's not just about individual growth anymore. It's
Yeah.
about the entire organization evolving.
And a key part of that is the organizational culture. It shapes how everyone behaves and responds to change.
It's the organization's personality, so to speak.
A good way to think about it, and just like with people, some personalities are more adaptable than others. Some are more open to change and growth.
So what does a healthy, adaptable culture look like?
The book points to open communication, trust, collaboration, and a willingness to embrace new things.
An environment where it's safe to take risks, try new approaches, and learn from mistakes.
That's the idea.
And leadership plays a huge role in creating that kind of culture.
Absolutely. Leaders have to walk the talk, model those behaviors, and empower their employees to do the same.
So it's about more than just saying the right words. It's about taking action, setting an example, and creating a supportive environment where everyone can thrive.
And in the end, that benefits everyone.
Yeah. We've covered so much in this deep dive into the Handbook of Work and Health Psychology. It's been a fascinating look at how work impacts our lives.
And vice versa. It's all interconnected.
From the hidden costs of stress, to finding that sweet spot of challenge, to the unique needs of different individuals and groups, it's given us a lot to think about.
And hopefully some practical tools to create more positive work experiences.
It's definitely challenged some of my assumptions about work.
Me too.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question. If we know that work can have such a big impact on our health and well-being, shouldn't we be striving to create workplaces that actively promote those things?
That's a great question to ponder. It's a challenge for all of us to really rethink how we work and how we can build a future where work is a source of fulfillment, not just a means to an end.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of work, health psychology, and well-being,
We hope you found it insightful.
and that you'll continue exploring these ideas.
After all, creating healthier and more fulfilling work experiences benefits everyone.